The envelope landed between the mimosa flutes like it had weight, like it knew what it carried. Cream paper, red lettering, certified, legal service required. Not festive, not bridal, not anything that belonged at a linen-draped table where my future mother-in-law was praising the pastry chef and my fiancé was being toasted for finally settling down. I remember thinking for a split second that someone had made a mistake that would be corrected in seconds. It wasn't corrected. The courier didn't apologize. He didn't smile. He asked for a signature, scanned the room once and said my fiancé's name out loud, clear enough for the table to hear, then looked at me when my fiancé didn't answer. Chairs scraped. Someone laughed nervously. The restaurant smelled like citrus and champagne and money. I reached for the envelope without standing, and because making a scene would have required intention, and at that moment I was only responding. My name is Margaret Hale. I was 43 years old at that table, senior compliance director at a regional investment firm, the woman people described as steady. I had been engaged for 8 months to Daniel Foster, the youngest son in a family whose name was printed on hospitals and arts wings. We lived together in his house, were weeks away from sending final wedding counts, and had just hosted an engagement brunch meant to reassure everyone that this merger, romantic and financial, was on schedule. Daniel had stepped away to take a call when the courier arrived. I noticed because he'd been doing that all morning, excusing himself with a hand on my shoulder, whispering just business. His father was explaining a zoning dispute to my cousin. His mother was discussing flower arrangements as if she were underwriting them. I slid my finger under the envelope flap because it felt procedural. Certified mail demands completion. It does not ask permission. Inside was a notarized paternity filing, the seal pressed so hard it left an impression through the page. A child's name I didn't recognize. A birth date from 2 years earlier, 4 months before Daniel proposed. There were attachments, escrow statements, monthly disbursements, an LLC I'd never heard of, but the address stopped me cold. A townhouse on Brookline Row. I knew it because it was 10 minutes from my office because I'd once considered buying there myself. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I took out my phone and photographed every page, slow and methodical the way I review audit trails. Across the table, Daniel's mother was telling someone that I had such a calming influence. I slid the documents back into the envelope, folded it once, and set it on Daniel's empty chair. Then I stood, picked up my purse and said, "I need some air," like a woman who expected to return. "Margaret?" his mother called, already smiling, already performing concern. Daniel's sister followed me halfway to the door, whispering my name again, as if volume were the issue. I didn't answer. Outside, the late morning sun hit my eyes too hard. The valet asked if I was leaving. I nodded. My phone started buzzing before I reached the car. Daniel first, then his mother, then my best friend. But I didn't check it. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and replayed the pages in my head. The filing wasn't a rumor or a threat. It was filed, recorded, witnessed. The escrow receipts weren't occasional. They were consistent, disciplined, structured to look like maintenance rather than support. Whoever had set this up understood compliance. They understood concealment. I thought of Daniel's father's lecture about zoning and realized it wasn't small talk. It was muscle memory. Daniel knocked on the window, breathless, jacket half buttoned. I cracked the door instead of the glass. "What was that?" he asked, already defensive. I handed him the envelope. He looked at it for less than a second before his face changed. Not shock, not confusion, but calculation. "This isn't what it looks like," he said quickly. "Someone's trying to extort me. I didn't want you involved." "You didn't want me informed," I corrected. My voice sounded normal. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. A notarized filing isn't extortion. It's a record. He reached for my hand and missed. Behind him, through the window, I could see his parents watching us with identical expressions like investors monitoring a dip they expected to recover. "We can talk inside," he said. "Everyone's staring." I glanced back. People weren't staring. They were pretending not to, which is worse. I shook my head. Not here, I said. Not now. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're overreacting, he said, softly enough to sound reasonable. You're tired. Let's just get through today. That was the moment I knew he would try to manage me instead of telling the truth. I started the engine. He stepped back, hands raised, performing patience. As I pulled away, my phone lit up again, texts stacking, missed calls multiplying. I ignored them all and drove without music, my mind cataloguing facts instead of feelings. The townhouse address resurfaced uninvited. Brookline Row, 10 minutes from my office. Close enough to maintain, close enough to hide. By the time I reached my office parking garage, the story was already being written without me. That's what certified paper does when it hits a family like Daniel's. It doesn't just expose a secret, it triggers a containment plan. My phone kept lighting up in the cup holder, bright as an alarm. I didn't answer. I sat in the dark of level 3 with the engine off and the envelope on my lap. And I told myself one thing. Facts first, feelings later. If I let them lead with emotion, they'd steer me wherever they wanted. I went upstairs like it was a normal day. I nodded at security, rode the elevator, and stepped into my office where everything smelled like toner and stale coffee. Safe, ordinary. Then I locked my door and opened my laptop with the same calm I used when regulators came calling. The townhouse address went into a property search. The LLC name went into the state business registry. I didn't hope it would be fake. I didn't pray it was a mistake. Hope is just a soft spot someone else can press. Brookline Row came up immediately. Clean photos, tasteful staging, a listing history that ended with a purchase made through an entity that sounded harmless, almost charitable. But when I pulled the LLC filing, my stomach finally tightened. Registered agent, a firm Daniel's family had used for decades. Mailing address, a suite in the same building as Foster Holdings' legal offices. I opened the escrow statement photo on my phone, zoomed in on the bank routing number, and cross-checked it with a public UCC filing. The account wasn't Daniel's personal. It traced back to a trust-managed disbursement channel. Daniel arrived at my office building before I had time to print anything. He texted that he was in the lobby like he was doing me a favor. I watched him through the glass from the mezzanine, hands in pockets, jaw set, looking like a man rehearsing concern. When he saw me, his face softened into the expression people trusted. "Maggie, please," he said, using the nickname only his mother used when she wanted me pliable. "Let's talk where it's quiet." We went to a small conference room near the elevators. He chose the room with glass walls, the one where passers-by could see us but not hear. Optics. Always optics. "You left without saying anything," he started, like my exit was the offence. I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward him, screen lit with the property record. "Brookline Row," I said. "You've been paying for it. Through an LLC connected to your family's registered agent, and there's a notarized paternity filing with your name on it." His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "I didn't hide anything from you," he said, too quickly. "That letter, someone sent it to blow things up. The townhouse is complicated. It's a short-term investment. My parents manage a lot of things through entities. And the paternity filing, Margaret, you don't understand how ugly things get when money is involved." He leaned in, voice low, warm. "I was going to tell you when it was handled." "Handled," I repeated, tasting the word. "Like a problem, like a leak." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask him why. I asked him for structure. "Is the child yours?" I said. That question, direct and clean, cut through his practiced narrative. He blinked, just once too slow, then said, "I'm not admitting anything based on a piece of paper that could be part of a scheme." Not denial. Not the truth. A lawyer's fog. When I didn't move, he tried a different tool. "You're spiraling," he said gently, like he was naming a symptom. "You've been under stress. Wedding planning, work, all of it. You see a document, and you assume the worst. He reached across the table, palm up. Come home tonight. Let's talk with my parents. They'll explain the business side. We'll straighten this out. That's when I realized he wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to create a record that I was unstable. I didn't refuse, I agreed. Not because I believed him, but because I wanted to see what explanation they'd dare offer with their faces uncovered. That evening, I drove to the foster house in my own car instead of arriving with him. I carried nothing but my phone and a slim folder of printed records. The dining room was set like a diplomatic meeting. Candles, cloth napkins, and good water glasses. Daniel's mother, Patricia, kissed my cheek too firmly. Sweetheart, she said, we've been worried. Daniel's father, Robert, didn't waste time on affection. He poured wine, sat, and folded his hands like a man about to approve a budget. Margaret, he said, Daniel tells us you received a document that upset you. He said it the way someone complains. Patricia added, we understand how sensational things can look when you don't have context. I didn't touch the wine. I placed the property record on the table between them. Context is what I'm here for, I said. Patricia glanced at Robert before speaking, like she needed authorization to tell the truth. There is a child, she said finally, the words clipped and controlled. Daniel stared at his plate. A situation, she continued, that was resolved in every practical sense. Support is provided. Privacy is maintained. Robert's voice became colder. And it had nothing to do with you until you made it about you. The way he said you told me I wasn't family yet. I was a variable. I looked at Daniel. You told me there was no one, I said. And he didn't answer. Patricia leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was sharing a hard-earned secret. Margaret, you're a smart woman, she said. You know what reputation does. You know what a headline does. There are structures in place in this family that protect more than money. They protect employees, charities, partnerships, the trust. Robert nodded once like he'd just named the real God at the table. The trust, I repeated. So, this is about inheritance. Daniel finally spoke, softer than before. It's not like that. Robert cut him off with a look that landed like a gavel. It is exactly like that, Robert said to me, no apology in it. The trust has clauses, behavioural clauses, disclosure clauses, marriage clauses. If a beneficiary's household is deemed destabilising before certain milestones, our distributions can be delayed or redirected. You can call it unfair. You can also call it a contract. I kept my expression neutral while my mind built the shape of it. This wasn't a secret kept out of shame. It was a secret kept to avoid triggering a mechanism. So you hid a child, I said evenly, to keep money moving on schedule. Patricia's eyes narrowed, offended by my phrasing, not by the act. We maintained privacy, she corrected. And Daniel was going to be married, to you, a woman with discretion. We assumed you would understand what's at stake. That sentence landed heavier than any insult. We assumed you would understand. They hadn't chosen me because I was loved. They had chosen me because I was controllable, because I worked in compliance, because I knew how to keep my mouth shut when rules were bent. I didn't tell them that. And I asked one question that mattered. Where is the child? Patricia's lips pressed into a line. Robert's eyes went flat. Daniel said, That's not relevant, which told me it was. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I stood, gathered my papers, and said, I need time. Patricia stood too quickly, reaching for my arm. Of course, she said, voice sweet again. Take your time. We just want you to be okay. Daniel followed me to the foyer, speaking softly, urgently. They didn't mean it the way it sounded, he said. They're blunt. It's just business. His hand hovered near my shoulder like he could guide me back into place. Please don't talk to anyone yet. I drove home to my apartment instead of his house. I hadn't lived there since we moved in together, but my key still worked, and the air still smelled like my detergent, not his cologne. I set my phone on the counter and finally checked the messages. There were dozens. Some were Daniel. Some were Patricia. A few were friends asking if I was okay. Then a new voicemail arrived from Jenna, my closest friend in our circle, her voice tight, cautious. "Maggie," she said. "I don't know how to say this, but Daniel's been calling people. He's saying you had some kind of episode at the brunch, like you weren't yourself. People are worried." I stared at the wall above the sink, listening to the voicemail end, and felt the ground shift under me, not because I doubted myself, but because I understood the new battleground. He wasn't trying to fix what he'd done. He was trying to make sure that when the truth arrived, nobody believed the messenger. My phone buzzed again with a text from Daniel. "Please stop. You're scaring people." And in that moment, I realized the next move wasn't emotional. It was legal. By morning, the word had already found me. Not shouted, not posted, not spoken aloud where it could be challenged, just passed hand to hand like a warning label. Unstable. It showed up in the pauses between sentences, in the way people checked their phrasing before texting me back. Daniel's version was efficient. Concern without accusation, sympathy without facts. He didn't say I was lying. He said I was overwhelmed. And overwhelmed women, he knew, are rarely believed over organised men. The wedding planner emailed to pause timelines. A florist asked if we should hold inventory. My assistant asked if I needed the afternoon off. I went to work anyway and closed my door. Gaslighting only works if you participate, and I opened my files and built a timeline, not of feelings but of documents, the paternity filing, the escrow trail, the LLC. I printed everything twice and labeled it like an exhibit list, because order is the enemy of doubt. Daniel called just before lunch. I let it go to voicemail. "Maggie," he said gently, as if speaking to someone fragile. "People are worried. You left an event. You're not answering, and now you're making accusations. Please let me come with you to talk to someone. We can get ahead of this." He framed help as supervision. I saved the message and forwarded it to myself with the date and time intact. Records matter. Tone doesn't. I met with my attorney that afternoon, not to threaten, but to understand the terrain. She listened without interruption, eyes narrowing at the right moments. When I finished, she asked one question I hadn't considered. "Did you execute any addendums to the prenup after the initial signing?" I told her no, then stopped. There had been a routine update months earlier, folded into a larger package of estate planning adjustments. Boring, procedural. Daniel hadn't come. I signed electronically between meetings. We pulled the file. There it was. A recorded addendum, notarized and filed, clean as a ledger entry. It expanded disclosure requirements tied to trust-linked assets and beneficiaries. Language my firm used all the time to protect against future disputes. At the time, it had seemed mutual, precautionary. But there was a clause I hadn't appreciated then. Automatic consent to independent audit upon material misrepresentation, triggered by evidence submitted to a trustee, or evidence like a notarized paternity filing, evidence like escrow receipts. Daniel had never reviewed the final version. His attorney had rushed it through, assuming alignment. The addendum didn't accuse anyone. It didn't need to. It created a mechanism. I felt something like relief, not triumph, not anger, relief that the next step didn't require persuasion. Systems don't care who's charming, they care who complied. My attorney looked at me and said, "If you file this with the trust administrator alongside what you have, it initiates a process you don't control. Neither do they." That night, Daniel showed up at my apartment without asking. He stood in the doorway like a man visiting a patient. "You're making this worse," he said, scanning the room as if looking for evidence of a breakdown. "My parents think you should talk to someone neutral. This doesn't have to follow you." He used my name like an anchor. I told him I was fine and asked him to leave. He smiled sadly. "This isn't you," he said. "You don't burn everything down over a misunderstanding." I didn't correct him. I waited until he left, then opened my laptop and logged into the trust portal, public-facing, regulated, impersonal. I attached the addendum. I attached the filing. I attached the escrow statements and the property record. I wrote a single sentence in the submission field. Evidence of undisclosed dependent and asset concealment per Section 4, C. No commentary. No emotion. I clicked submit and watched the confirmation number appear. Once filed, it couldn't be withdrawn without consent from the trustee and the beneficiary. Consent Daniel would never give. The notice went out the next morning, not to me, to the trust administrator, the compliance team, and the designated beneficiaries. Daniel called within minutes, voice tight now, the warmth gone. "What did you do?" he asked. "Why is my father calling me?" I told him the truth without explanation. "I filed a recorded addendum," I said. "It triggers a review." He went quiet, then angry. "You had no right," he said. "You're going to destroy things you don't understand." I thought of his father explaining clauses like weather patterns. "I understand contracts," I said. "That's why I signed one." By afternoon, the narrative shifted again. Concern hardened into alarm. Patricia called, voice sharp. "This is reckless," she said. "Audits don't stay contained." Robert emailed from his work account, the subject line all caps, "Withdraw immediately." He cited partnerships, employees, boards. He did not mention the child. Daniel texted apologies threaded with warnings. "They're saying this could affect everything," he wrote. "Please, let's meet with my father and fix this quietly." Quiet is what liars need when the light turns on. I didn't respond. I forwarded every message to my attorney and kept working. Late that evening, an automated notice arrived from the trust administrator. Emergency audit scheduled. Scope: asset disclosure and beneficiary compliance. Date listed beneath it. I read it twice. The audit wasn't months away. It was days. And the final line made my pulse slow instead of spike. Findings to be presented at the next shareholders' meeting. The shareholders' meeting was public-facing in the way powerful gatherings are. Closed doors, open consequences. And Daniel had been preparing for it for weeks, polishing slides, rehearsing remarks about stability and growth. Now the agenda had changed without his input. He called again, this time leaving no voicemail, just silence hanging on my screen. Outside, traffic moved, ordinary and indifferent. I sat at my desk and imagined a room full of people who believed in numbers more than stories. That night, alone in my apartment, I packed the last of my things from his house into boxes I wouldn't deliver. I wasn't angry, I wasn't scared, I was precise. The word unstable had been a test, to see if I'd react. I hadn't. I'd filed. I'd triggered something larger than us. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed one last time with an email alert I didn't need to open to recognize. Meeting confirmed. 2 days. And for the first time since brunch, I slept without dreaming. If this story made you lean forward instead of scrolling away, that's not an accident. Stories like this don't come from drama. They come from consequences, from systems turning when someone finally files the right document instead of raising their voice. If you want more stories where quiet decisions dismantle powerful lies, where patience beats panic, and where truth wins without shouting, subscribe now. New stories drop regularly, and they're all built the same way. Slow burn tension, real-world stakes, and endings that actually land. Click subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay ahead. Because the most dangerous moves are always the ones made calmly, on record, and in plain sight.